Hello, and welcome to the Pellissippi State Library's spring event, Celebrate Appalachia, celebrating Howard Louis Bluey Armstrong, an Appalachian original. This program is affiliated with the Pellissippi State Library's Appalachian Heritage Project, which supports humanities education at the college through the study and promotion of our regional history, culture, and arts. The project is supported by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our focus today, Howard Louis Bluey Armstrong, was a true Appalachian original who traveled the world as a musician, artist, and storyteller. Renowned for a lifetime of playing jazz, blues, folk, and country music, and considered one of the nation's finest Black string band musicians, Armstrong had mastery of 22 musical instruments and 7 foreign languages. He is the subject of 2 documentary films, an award-winning play, and an annual festival held at Cove Lake State Park in Campbell County, Tennessee. Our 3 presenters, Chris Derman, Kelly Jolly, and Sean McCullough, are organizers of and performers in the festival. And we are thrilled to share their presentation about Armstrong. We will have a live question and answer session after the presentation, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat. Before we begin, I am pleased to introduce our accomplished presenters. Chris Derman is an associate professor and coordinator of the George F. Devine Music Library at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He has been an active member of regional and national music library associations, having served, among other positions, as president of the East Tennessee Library Association and chair of the Southeast chapter of the Music Library Association. He has published in Tennessee Libraries, Music Reference Services Quarterly, and Notes, taught workshops on music reference and music collection development, and presented to various professional organizations. Although appreciative of almost all music, Derman nurtures an abiding interest in American vernacular and popular music. He has served on the Louis Bluey Music and Art Festival Program Committee since 2010 and has performed semi-professionally for over 40 years as a singer-songwriter, as a guitarist, and as a member of various ensembles. Kelly Jolly, the Tennessee Ukulele Lady, is an accomplished music entertainer and educator. She shares musical stories and songs from the South. Her repertoire includes traditional African-American music of blues, jazz, spirituals, and folk. Kelly is a graduate of South Carolina State University, where she studied music education with concentrations in voice. Kelly is the 2011 Mountain Soul Vocal Competition winner and the Knoxville Community Shares 2013 Artist of the Year. She is the host of Jazz Jam, Knoxville's only vocal jazz radio show on WUOT 91.9 FM. She is the founder of the Women in Jazz Jam Festival and Ukasphere of Knoxville. Kelly and her saxophonist husband, Will Boyd, have served as ambassadors of jazz from Tennessee to Japan. They are Knoxville MLK Commission Artist Award recipients. In 2021, the city of Knoxville proclaimed July 21st, Kelly Jolly and Will Boyd Day in Knoxville. She is currently a graduate student in the Communication and Storytelling Studies program at East Tennessee State University, pursuing her Master of Arts degree. Our last presenter, Sean McCullough, is a musicologist, teacher, artist in the schools, musician, music producer, and festival organizer. With a master's degree in musicology and ethnomusicology, he has taught at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville since 1997, most regularly teaching Appalachian music, the history of rock, and introduction to Western music. In addition to being one of the lead organizers of Vestival in South Knoxville, Sean has worked extensively with the Louis Bluey Music and Arts Festival, with roles as program committee member and co-chair, festival performer, and artist in residence in Campbell County Schools, where he teaches students about Louie Bluey and Appalachian music and leads them in a musical performance at the festival. As a children's performer, he is a 2-time National Parents' Choice Award winner and is the radio host of Kid Stuff on WDVX. He has performed and been an artist in residence at countless schools since the mid-1990s and performed at numerous libraries, theaters, venues, and festivals as both a solo performer and with his acclaimed Americana group, the Lone Tones. I want to thank our presenters for sharing their expertise and for honoring Howard Armstrong. Please welcome Chris Derman, Kelly Jolly, and Sean McCullough. Brandon, we can begin.
Welcome everyone. My name is Kelly Jolly, and I am a local musician, singer, radio show host, ukulele player, and entertainer. And here with me today to talk about Howard Louie Bluey Armstrong are two of my musical friends.
Well, thanks, Kelly. I'm Sean McCullough, and I as well am a local musician and radio host, like Kelly is too. And I also teach musicology at the University of Tennessee, where my good friend over here works. Tell us who you are.
I'm Chris Derman. I'm a music librarian at the University of Tennessee, and I have no radio show.
We're going to get you one, though.
Okay. But I am a local musician as well. And we're here, like Kelly said, to talk about Howard Louie Bluey Armstrong, who was a string band musician, a multi-instrumentalist, a multilingual person, a visual artist of in a variety of mediums, and a very long-lived and interesting man who has been the subject of 2 documentary films. And he was born in Dayton, Tennessee, but he was raised in La Follette, Tennessee. In the Campbell County, where that is, they've chosen to create a festival in his name, the Louie Bluey Music and Arts Festival. The reason, well, there's many reasons to be interested in Howard, really.
You know what? Why don't we show him a little bit of Howard?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Just because he speaks so well for himself. So we're going to show you a little video clip, and we'll be back in just a second.
We're going to play you a song about old time soul, brother. Yeah, I like to interject this little thing. Soul has no color. Black, green, striped, or gray of what? It's inside you, what you can project. And this brother, after he was dead for 40 years, wasn't it 40 years?
40 years.
11 months.
11 months.
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
4 days.
4 days.
5 hours.
5 hours.
And 15 minutes. He still didn't know he was a soul brother.
But who's counting?
He died with a hammer in his hand, driving steel, up on the Big 4 in West Virginia. And his name was John Henry. John Henry was a steel driving man. Now, my man, just because the man fell dead with the hammer in his hand, I don't want you to play a funeral march. You hear me? I want you to step it up and go. Because if you can't keep up, you sure enough can't catch up. And I'm gone. You hear me? I'm dusting my broom. Be a steel driving man someday. Wanna be a steel driving man. Yes, I wanna be a steel driving man. Wanna be a steel driving man.
Howard was born to a musical family. He was born in 1909, and his other siblings also played.
Yeah, and he formed a family band with his brothers when he was just a little kid. Really, he played mandolin largely. Yeah, he ends up playing a whole lot of stringed instruments, but he started off with this instrument right here. Well, not this exact one, but the mandolin.
Is that his first, or was the cigar box fiddle his father made for him? Was that his first?
I don't know the answer to that, actually,
I
Chris.
think it was a cigar box fiddle that his father carved for him and made for him. He would have carved the neck and used a cigar box, obviously, for the sound box. Howard was up there. His dad worked in the blast furnace that was in La Follette at the time. And as I've said, Howard started arts early. He did a whole lot of visual arts very, very early in his life, but he started playing music very early too. And he was a very practical man who played to the audience in front of him. And a quirk of La Follette and that area was it was more diverse back in the early 1900s than it is now, because the waves of immigration that hit America came to work in the mines and in the blast furnace.
So yeah, if you were walking around the streets of La Follette back in the 1920s, you were likely to hear people speaking Polish and German and Italian. If you ever gone to any of these little Appalachian towns that have really good Italian restaurants out in the middle of nowhere, this is why. It's because Italian immigrants alongside other immigrants came to work in the coal mines. So Howard was growing up during a time where, yeah, La Follette, like many Appalachian towns, was quite diverse.
And so with that diverse community, you're influenced by the sounds that you hear, the languages you hear, and you pick up on the music that you hear too. So over the years, his repertoire included music that was influenced by all the people from his community, and he carried that music all around the world with playing by himself and with various bands that he played with. He was a member of the Tennessee Chocolate Drops, and that included at times Carl Martin and Ted Bogan too.
And Carl was from, a little farther east in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. And like Howard, he played lots of stringed instruments, and he's who kind of got Howard down into Knoxville to play. When Howard was still a kid, he moved in with Carl Martin's family down in Knoxville, and they played on the street corners, they played in venues, and then eventually there was a recording session that happened in the 1929 and 1930. We call them sometimes the Knoxville sessions or the St. James sessions, because they were in the St. James Hotel. And they recorded music right there in downtown Knoxville. And they recorded under two names. Tell us why, Chris.
Well, in those days, there was a pretty false dichotomy, and it's largely because of marketing. The record companies wanted to simplify how they were going to do their marketing. So if you're playing vernacular, folk and traditional, popular music of the day, if you're white, you played, and you were playing anything akin to string band music, you were playing hillbilly music. If you were black, they labeled you as a blues artist, and they called those records at the time race records. So for Howard, their music, like I said, he was a very practical gentleman that played to the audience in front of him, and he could play a very diverse repertoire. What they recorded at the St. James sessions sounded very much like, I've heard it called hillbilly jazz. It was a combination of the blues, string band music, and jazz. And it was such that you couldn't really tell from just listening to it the race of the artist. So they kind of sold it to both audiences. They released the records on the race records as the Tennessee Chocolate Drops. They released it on the hillbilly records as the Tennessee Trio. It's really interesting. It's the only one that I know of where they did that.
Yeah, that wasn't really usual. Most of the time what they would do if they were recording like what they thought was hillbilly music and a black artist or group showed up, they'd just tell them no, because you're not supposed to record hillbilly music. But in this case, Yeah, they just gave them two different names and released it as Hillbilly Music and Race Records.
Well, that
Same
Knoxville
time.
recording session was probably like one of the most diverse sessions because it included many black musicians, including black women musicians like Leola Manning too, who was a contemporary and a friend of Howard Armstrong.
That's right. Yeah, and that was unusual. Most of the time, these recording sessions that were happening, they would be either aimed at recruiting black artists or white artists, but not both. And so the Knoxville sessions were unique.
Right. It
In that kinda
represented
way.
the way people lived here.
That's true, and it represented the music because, you know, as much as the record companies might have wanted to, and still do to some degree,
Yeah.
make a very distinct line between who plays what music, you know, musicians play music.
Right. I think that's what stands out about Howard Armstrong is that he played music. He wasn't a this type or that type of musician. He was a musician, and so his music his repertoire reflected his life. You know, of course, he played gospel music. He played string band music. He played blues when it was time to play blues, and he might have played a little Hawaiian music sometimes.
He did. He did.
Yeah, because he was actually stationed in Hawaii in the Army, right? During Pearl Harbor, is my understanding.
That's my understanding too.
Soaked up some of that Hawaiian music as well. And I don't know, I think he claimed to maybe speak 9 languages by later in his life. Certainly he spoke several quite well, and certainly sang in several quite well.
So after the St. James sessions, Howard and Carl and later Ted Bogan, they took off traveling. They play often just in the summers up through West Virginia. They'd play in the coal camps. They'd play to where the audiences were. Eventually, they made it up to Chicago, where I believe is it Chicago where they played the World's Fair?
Yep.
They played in Chicago's World's Fair.
We're back in the 1930s.
Back in the 1930s, yeah. Eventually, Howard quit playing for a while. He took a break to raise a family, and he worked in Detroit, I believe, didn't he? In the Chrysler?
Yeah.
Was it Chrysler?
Yep, for 23 years or so, something like that.
When he retired from Chrysler, he reformed the old band, and they went on and they toured basically all of the states. They were very popular. They recorded some albums. They toured South America, and they continued to play for a very long time.
Yeah. And it seems that, you know, from things that Howard told others, that one of the reasons, besides stopping to raise a family, that he stopped playing music was because he wanted to be recorded and he wanted to have a career, and he was being told that as a black musician, all he could do was blues or jazz, and that's not all he wanted to do. And so he seems to have maybe been a bit discouraged about all of that as well, and perhaps that was a reason he took a break too. So he certainly was a musical lover. I mean, he played his last show here in Knoxville, right, at the Laurel Theater in his 90s. And Chris was there.
I was there, and it was a delightful thing. I was lucky enough to meet Howard several times, and one of the things I was able to do, and I'm going to come up real close to the camera real quick so you can see it. He made this necklace. He made these little things, and he called them tikis. And a whole lot of people that knew Howard, he gave those to them. But by the time I got to see him, and he was being honored in Kentucky, he was being given one of their Heritage Awards. And I was lucky to go meet him there, and he sold me this one, but I'm still delighted to have it. It's one of my treasures.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
He also came to play at the World's Fair. So there's Howard never forgot his old hometown and the times he spent in his childhood in East Tennessee, and he did come back to visit. He and I don't know if Carl was with him or if it was just Ted.
I think it was maybe just Ted, but I'm not sure.
By the time they were playing the fair. Later on, they made a movie about Howard. A fellow named Terry Zwigoff made a movie called Louie Bluey, because that was Howard's nickname. The story goes that he was playing a place, and this woman came up inebriated, and Howard's name was Howard Armstrong, and she got confused, and she said apparently, you're not Louis Armstrong, you're just Louis Bluey. And Howard, being having a good sense of humor, he incorporated that, and that became his stage name from then on out.
Yeah.
And that is the name of the first documentary about him.
Yeah.
There's a second one too that's called Sweet Old Song, that is about the relationship that he had with his wife, Barbara Ward Armstrong. And both are absolutely delightful.
Yeah, they are. Y'all should watch them.
Yeah.
I was going to back up for just a minute,
Please.
just to clarify, because we'd mentioned that he played in the World's Fair with his bandmates in Chicago in the 30s. The one you were just referring to, of course, was the Knoxville World's Fair in 1982, right?
Yeah.
And I went to that World's Fair twice. And had I only known what I was going to be interested in as a grown-up, I could have seen them play. And I may have seen them play, but I didn't know who they were at the time.
I had season passes for that fair, and I did not know of Howard at that time. And I spent a whole lot of time at the Folklife area where he played, and I am not at all sure if I saw him at the time. I would have been in high school then, and I found Howard a little bit later, and when I was in college, when he was touring around with the film Louis Bluey. He came to UT campus and he played before the film, and that's really where I got my introduction to him, and
Yeah.
that's where I fell in love with Howard and his music. And it's easy to fall in love with Howard once you've, especially after seeing Louis Bluey, learn a little bit about him, see him perform. It was very easy.
Well, how about we play some music that we've learned from Howard?
That
That
sounds
seems like
great.
a great plan.
What do you think? Lady Be Good?
Sure.
All right, NC.
And see it is.
Okay.
That'll work.
A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, boom.
Let's try that again. I botched the beginning of that. Terrible.
A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, sweet and lovely lady, lady be good. Oh, lady be good, lady be good to me. I am so often misunderstood. So, lady be good to me. Won't somebody please have some pity? I am so all alone in this great big city. I'm just a little bitty baby, wah, wah, out here in the woods. So, lady be good to me. Oh, lady be good to me. Oh, lady, 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 be good to me.
Nice. And that was one of Howard's signature songs there. He played that a lot. I
Right.
guess,
It's
yeah.
a very popular jazz standard. And you know, when you're playing, you're a musician and you're playing for audiences, you want to play something that they know so they like you.
Yep.
Yes, you do.
Oh, very good. Well, why don't we tell them a little bit about some of the work we've done around Howard's legacy and his life. And
Well, tell first how you all found Howard.
I think it has to do with your T-shirt.
Does it have to do with my T-shirt?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
You're our model today, Chris. What does that shirt say? That shirt says the Louis
Louis
Bluey Festival, Music and Arts, a celebration of the life of Howard Armstrong. So the Louis Bluey Festival has really impacted our region culturally. So I would like to hear. I feel like I'm like the newbie here. So if y'all could talk a little bit about the Louis Bluey Festival.
I think you were officially involved in it before me.
perhaps,
So
yeah.
so Sean, you're first.
All right, I'll start. So at some point, I got a phone call asking me if I'd be on this committee. And, I say no a lot when somebody says the word committee, because that's not my favorite thing to do.
Right.
But they told me what it was. And I was like, well, yeah.
And who it's for.
Yeah, and who it's for, and I was very excited because here's a festival not just in honor of a wonderful musician and artist, but a festival that is in his hometown or in his backyard, and it is to celebrate who he is, his life, his contributions, and I couldn't say no, I guess, because all of that means so much to me. So they started this festival, and it has music, and it has art, arts and crafts vendors and food as well. And the three of us at this point are on the program committee to program the music. And one of the things that we really try hard to do is to kind of represent this broad spectrum of music that Howard either played or drew from in one way or the other. So at the festival, we'll have everything from what you might call bluegrass music, all the way over to the blues, or that's not actually that far over. They share a lot in common.
Yeah.
But
Jazz,
or we might have
blues.
jazz, or we might have music from other cultures,
Yes.
like he would play music from other cultures, and so we really try to kind of honor that he drew from so many traditions and didn't just stick to one thing. And I think one of the things that makes that festival so unique is exactly that, is that, a lot of times if you go to a festival, it is a blues festival or a folk festival or a bluegrass festival or whatever. And this really isn't that, it's in honoring somebody who played, drawing from a lot of traditions. But anyway, so, but again, if it were just about the music, I probably wouldn't have gotten involved just for that either. But I think it's really important for us to remember that the history of music not in this region, in this country, is a lot more kind of complicated and simple.
Multifaceted, really.
Multifaceted.
Multifaceted. So the Campbell Culture Coalition took on this festival, created this festival as one of their projects. And it celebrates Howard Louis Bluey Armstrong in a day of music and art. And it presents musicians that are local as well as musicians that are nationally and internationally recognized, all in Caryville, Tennessee, in a beautiful setting by the lake.
At Cove Lake State Park.
Cove Lake State Park. And again, it honors this unique African American from East Tennessee who is really limitless. His skills and his talents were limitless and boundless, and he just shared a lot with the world. And so to honor that legacy, the festival celebrates that energy, that spirit of Howard Armstrong that's found throughout people still living here.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been able to do that's particularly cool, I think, is even though Howard had died by the time the festival started, we've been able to bring in a lot of the artists that have played with him. So, and his son, Ralph Armstrong, who has had a tremendous career in jazz, playing with people as diverse as Jean-Luc Ponty, to Frank Zappa, to Aretha Franklin, to
Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Mahavishnu Orchestra. So he has really played with some outstanding musicians, and he still does. In fact, I think this year he's organizing a reunion of the Funk Brothers, who were the the band that recorded a whole lot of the Motown hits that you know. Ralph lives in Detroit now and often comes down with a fellow named Ray Camillet, who also played quite a lot with Howard in one of his bands. Bruce Millard has come down, who played with Howard for several years. And then one of the people that always comes, and it's the only act that has played every single one, is Sparky and Rhonda Rucker. And Sparky and Rhonda both knew Howard too, and they are, great ambassadors of music of this region to the world too.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of our goals, and one of the things that the folks at the Campbell Culture Coalition ask us to do, is to always keep Howard in the festival, to figure out how it's not just a festival in his name, but a festival that he is still part of and his spirit is present. So we really try to do that.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep Howard in the festival, because in his life, I'm sure he experienced times where he was not included or not recognized or not valued in the way that he should have been in his life. There were times when he wasn't allowed to compete in fiddle competitions. And I'm sure there were gigs that he didn't get because of other people's discrimination. But we have the opportunity now to honor his legacy and to remind people to recognize those types of gifts and talents in our communities.
Yeah. One thing I'm really proud of, the work of this festival, is maybe being just a little bit ahead of the curve. Right now there's a whole lot of great talk. I mean, it's wonderful stuff now going on about the contributions of a more diverse group of people in these mountains in our music, and particularly African American contributions that have kind of been left out of the contribution.
Right. We even have the Black Opry group touring in the United States right now.
Right. And we, in the whole Ken Burns country music thing, he delves really deeply into that. But we've been doing this festival before that became such a common thing, and so I'm kind of proud of that, because I'm happy all that's happening.
Most certainly.
But it needed to happen even sooner,
Right.
That's
Right.
for sure.
There's a Howard Armstrong among us right now.
Well, right. Yeah. Maybe it's you.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, that might be a good transition, though, because we wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how Howard has inspired us in our lives, and you want to start with that?
Okay, so I like to call myself the Appalachian Georgialina Peach. That means I was born in South Carolina, I grew up in Georgia, and I live in Tennessee. So I'm the Appalachian Georgialina Peach. But the Appalachian part came later in my life. I moved to Knoxville in 2006. And at that time, I was looking for groups to be a part of, and I discovered Carpetbag Theater, which is one of the only black Afrocentered theater groups in the country. And Carpetbag's mission is to tell the story of those who are usually left out, to tell the untold stories. And so I became a member of the cast of Between a Ballad and the Blues. It's a play written by Linda Paris Bailey, and it celebrates the life of Howard Armstrong and the Tennessee Chocolate Drops. So I was a cast member in that play, and I learned about Howard Armstrong, his contemporaries, Ted Bogan, Carl Martin, Leola Manning, and many others. And I just became inspired by this legacy of black musicians in East Tennessee. And I was playing guitar a little bit, but I really didn't like it. It was too big and bulky. I couldn't move and travel with it. I love to travel. My husband and I travel to Japan a lot. I like to travel. And I discovered ukulele, and I thought, now that's me. And so I felt like playing ukulele and being a part of the play Between the Ballad and the Blues showed me how I was a part of a legacy of black musicians, black string musicians in East Tennessee. So part of that mission is to perpetuate it and to celebrate who came before me. So I've been doing that, and now I'm on the committee along with Sean and Chris to find artists to honor at the festivals, to present at the festival to honor Howard. So I'm a part of the committee to do that with the Louis Bluey Festival. And in my own life, I try to honor that legacy of black musicians by including folk music, spirituals, gospel, blues, jazz in my own repertoire, even on ukulele or with my jazz band, or playing with my husband, Will Boyd. So that's how I got involved in the festival. I had interest in theater and music, and learning the stories for the plays inspired my music. And now I'm here.
All right. Yeah, and we're glad you are.
Thank you.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, so, one of the things that's been wonderful for me about being part of this festival is I teach at the University of Tennessee. I teach musicology classes, and I teach a lot about American music. And, it can sometimes feel, a little sterile or, not very real when you're just talking about things that you read about in a book or whatever. But to be able to talk about a musician and learn about a musician and be inspired by a musician who's from right here just was wonderful. And I had a really special week one week in which I've been teaching about Howard in a couple of my classes for a few years. And then in 1 week, I met the niece of Carl Martin, who was from up in Big Stone Gap. In that same week, I got a call from Linda Paris Bailey at Carpetbag Theater, or maybe from Nancy Brennan Strange. I got a call asking if I'd play mandolin for that play. And that was the same
Probably
week. And I was
Nancy.
like, something's happening right here that I was supposed to do this, right?
Yeah.
So I got to tour with that play a little bit with Kelly, and that was an amazing experience for me. And it made me feel like I knew Howard
Yeah.
more than I probably would have otherwise. So anyway, it definitely been an inspiring experience to get closer to his legacy through that and then through working on the festival, because I, unlike Chris, didn't ever meet Howard, so I'll pass it off to Chris.
Well, I think obviously I've already said that seeing Howard when he was touring around with Terry Zwigoff and Ted Bogan and Louie Bluey, the film, that's when I first saw him, but I didn't first meet him there. There were some years in between, and then I started wondering, well, what has become of him? And in those days, it was not easy to get CDs, so I had to work with local record stores to start buying my Louie Bluey CDs, because you couldn't just order. There was no Amazon then. Or there may have been, but I didn't have it. So I started getting the CDs, and then I started trying to find out where he was actually playing. So I was able to find a few places. He played 1 year when I guess I saw him in Kentucky for the first one, where I got my tiki, and then he played at Merle Fest down in North Carolina. And then they were doing a homecoming for him up in La Follette, and I went to that. And then that same trip, he came and played a show at the Laurel. And that show at the Laurel was just a marvelous thing, and it is some of it is included in Sweet Old Song. I think you can hear my hoot from the audience at some point in there. So my interest in Howard led me straight to the festival. I just attended the first festival as an audience member. The second year I volunteered, and they let me staff a hospitality tent, I believe. And that was fun for me. I got to sit around and talk to musicians all day long, which was wonderful. About the fourth year of the festival, I think it was, Sean and Nancy, knowing my love of all things Howard, invited me in to start helping program it. And I've been on board ever since, and I do love that. That's one of my favorite things to do, and the people I've met through that have been real gifts to me. How I've incorporated it in other aspects of my life besides my music, because I think it has absolutely affected how I play music. I've taken some techniques from Howard, some of the freewheeling aspects of it, what I think of as the joyousness of it, but it's an uninhibited joyfulness, that I try to incorporate, that I think I definitely take from Howard. But I also include it in my research. I'm one of those people that it's expected of me to do research for my position at work. And I've been able to, my love of Howard and and Martin Bogan and Armstrong led me into researching African American string bands, and also that led into researching African American banjo. And so I've had some really good articles that I think were absolutely inspired. I would not have come across if I had not found Howard.
Yeah. Well, that seems like it might be a pretty good place to wrap it up. Shall we play another song?
Yeah.
You got something else you want to share before we do?
So this music and these stories, they send us down, I like to say down a rabbit hole. But I enjoy it, being curious about people and curious about music and curious about art. And I think that's how Howard lived. That's the only way to learn all those languages and accumulate that repertoire, is to be curious about the world and find joy in it. You know,
100%. He was curious about the world and kept his intellectual curiosity going for his entire life, and it just is shown. It just shone right on through.
yeah. I think we should sing this little light of mine.
That sounds great.
All right. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, 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 let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Oh, let it shine.
All right. We hope you all will go out and learn more about Howard. Watch the documentaries.
Right.
Yes, indeed. Listen to some of his music.
Yes, he was an Appalachian original.
Well, it's all right. Sing my song, it's all right. Won't take long. It's all right, this funny song of mine. Well, now it's all right. Just won't quit. That's the reason I'm singing it. It's all right, this funny song of mine.
Thank you to Sean, Chris, and Kelly for that wonderful presentation and for the music. It's time now for our question and answer period. So audience, please put your questions in the chat and I will read some of them to our panelists. Wow, okay. Okay. Can you tell us how you think Armstrong used storytelling in his music and art? And do you think his storytelling relates to a particularly Appalachian kind of oral tradition?
Kelly, you want to
Wait,
take?
I think that one's to you, Kelly.
When we think about stories, sometimes we limit ourselves in thinking that a story is just the words that we put together and share orally. But stories are written, stories are performed, stories are designed, stories are sung. So Howard was able to use all of his skills to tell his story. So everything about Howard told a story. I'm sure as a young person who had a parent that was a preacher, he heard a lot of Bible stories and he spent time in church because that was the culture. And I'm sure he picked up stories from the church, picked up stories from his parents, like we all do. We gather stories from our families. And Howard used that and that experience in his presentation of his songs, just like most musicians do. You have to tell a story sometimes before you can sing a song. And Howard definitely did that. And you will witness that if you go back and look at some of the footage of his performances. He definitely told stories as he introduced songs. And then some of the songs that he sang told stories. So, you can't separate the artist from the story. He experienced stories growing up. He experienced life and included that in his presentations of his music and his visual art. Because even Chris, you shared your own story in receiving some of Howard's jewelry. So the story continues when the artist performs the story and shares the story with other people. And then we can look at Howard's complete life as a story and a lesson for all of us that represents what it means to live as a musician, to play string music from this region, from the mountains. And we can use that story to inspire and share more stories. I don't know. I feel like story is a word that just keeps producing more stories. And I think about it in my own life. I mean, that's why I'm in graduate school right now, because I felt like I need to be better at telling this, being more intentional about the stories, because I've seen now experience the artistry of people like Howard Armstrong, who were able to pull from their background, his background, and present his experiences and his influences through his art and story. So Howard Armstrong, just like many people from this area, grew up with storytellers in their lives, whether it was explicit or implicit, storytellers from our communities, our families. And then we learn how to use them in our profession. And then the whole view of our lives turns into a story that people can sit on a screen at Pellissippi and watch and talk about.
Well, one thing that I always tell my students about Howard is that his story is both exceptional and also representative of people from the region. It's an exceptional in that, not everybody's as talented a musician. Not everybody has as big a talent for language and learning languages as he did, et cetera, et cetera. But he also represented a lot about the region and people, making art out of their life's experience, and also represents the fact that there were a lot of African American musicians and artists and people in general in the region that have largely been written out of history. And telling his story is one way to kind of bring that back into our history as well. But I notice a bunch of questions all about kind of the same thing. Can I start to tackle them together? It's about our work in the schools. We've really done, well, I've been involved with at least kind of 3 different pieces of working in schools up in Campbell County. The first one I got involved with is that I started doing residencies in elementary schools, where I went and worked with the kids for a week and taught them about Howard's music, but then also taught them to sing and play to some degree, spoons and washboards and whatever, Howard's music, and then kind of facilitated the experience of having them come to the festival and play on stage with me, which was great fun every single year. I have to say the highlight was probably when Dom Flemons of the of the Carolina Chocolate Drops was our headliner, and he hopped up on stage and played Jug with us for one song. That was a lot of fun. The second thing that I've been involved with is that we've started bringing artists into the schools the day before the festival. So on the Friday before the festival, we take one of the artists who's performing at the festival and have them do a performance. I think we've always done it at two schools each year, and we've done elementary, middle school, and high school, I think, with that thing. And Dom Flemons has done that. We had Kofi Mauko, who's a African drummer he lives in Chattanooga, but he's from Ghana. He did it one year, and then Kelly and her husband Will Boyd and their band did it one year, and those have always been really wonderful experiences. And I think for the kids, it's just, the looks on their faces, as they watch those performances. It's clearly something like nothing they've ever experienced before. Unfortunately, just having music in their school is unique in some cases, but certainly having that. The third thing we did is during the pandemic, we used some grant money from the Tennessee Arts Commission to produce a couple of educational videos that teachers could show in their classroom. And if somebody out there, there are a few people on here who are part of the organization. If anybody out there could put their hands on those links, they could put them in the chat. But at any rate, so that's kind of the third thing we've done. The Campbell Culture Coalition has really tried to reach out to schools in many ways. They do art projects with kids, and the kids bring art to the festival, and so that's a broader objective of the Campbell Culture Coalition. But those are the musical things that we've done in relation to the festival. That was a lot, but it's because we've been doing a lot, which is cool.
Yes. Lauren is asking, is his visual art collected and housed anywhere? Where can it be viewed or visited?
Chris, you take that, because
that's a little bit more of a challenge. Unfortunately, it is not, to the best of my knowledge. I think you can find it online in a variety of places. There's several articles that have are pretty heavily illustrated with Howard's art. He was a great watercolorist in particular. He was just marvelous at that. He passed first. When his wife passed, I don't think the art was totally resolved what they were going to do with it. So that remains to be seen. I believe that his son Ralph has control of some of it, but I don't know how much. So I wish I had a better answer for you there.
Thanks, Chris. Susan is asking, how can we find out where the three of you are performing together?
We don't typically perform together unless it has something to do with Howard Armstrong. That's usually when that happens. But
Maybe we'll jam at the festival.
I like the sound of that.
We usually do.
You mentioned Armstrong's cigar box fiddle, and that made me wonder, were there any other kinds of Appalachian instruments or regional specific instruments that he played or made? And did he have a favorite instrument?
I think his favorite was probably the violin. That strikes me as what he played the most if he had his choice. He did play the mandolin equally well. He could play guitar. He could play, I think, anything with strings, really. The only one that I have heard rumor of that is another homemade instrument is I believe his father made them a stand-up bass somehow too for that early band. And that seems like quite a proposition to make a stand-up bass, but I think that's the only other homemade one that I know of right off.
and I'll just throw one thing. Go ahead.
the one thing related to being homemade that is pull it back into the his art and just his creativity is that he made his own brushes and his own paint for most of those early watercolors that he was doing. And I hope this isn't offending to anybody there, but he has a story that all the neighborhood cats were afraid of him because he was pulling their tail hairs out for his brushes. I shouldn't tell that one. I'm sorry if that offended anybody. He didn't hurt. Well, he may have hurt them as he pulled their hairs out of their tails, but it was a child thing.
Just a tangential thought. Chris used the word violin instead of the word fiddle. We often associate the music of this region with the term fiddle, right? It's the violin if you play classical music or jazz. It's the fiddle if you play country or folk or bluegrass or whatever, right? But Howard, interesting that you used the word violin because Howard, his technique shared some things in common with violinists. He played what you call a longbow style. A lot of old-time Appalachian fiddlers, they play a short bow style that's very rhythmic and that where you're moving the bow back and forth, almost on every note. Not always, but often on every single note. You're keeping that dancey kind of rhythm going. And Howard would often play this long bow style with vibrato, which we associate like more with classical music. So that was a bit unusual in terms of kind of Appalachian fiddle styles, and probably had something to do with who he learned from. I think maybe Carl Martin's brother.
Roland, I believe, isn't it? Blind Roland Martin?
Yeah, Brian Roland, yeah. Anyways, side note there.
Lauren commented, my 14-year-old just made a stand-up bass, so he may be interested to watch this presentation. Look forward to sharing it with him.
Nice.
I'm impressed. I would not be making a stand-up bass when I was 14. I'll tell you that. I was lucky to nail 2 boards together.
That's great, Lauren. It's not fancy.
I'm still impressed. I'm still very impressed.
It doesn't have to be fancy to be good.
That's true.
Yeah, when I play spoons, I just go grab some out the drawer. Not fancy, but you can make them sound good.
I actually think the ones you grab out of the drawer sound better than those ones you buy at Cracker Barrel.
Maybe. I've had some of those too. I sure do. I keep some right by me. I got some right by me right now.
So if folks hadn't noticed, if people aren't watching the chat, there are a bunch of links that people have put in the chat, information about this year's festival. So you may want to look at the chat before we get on here if you haven't yet.
It's worth saying it's going to happen at Cove Lake State Park on September 24th again this year, though.
Might as well.
Might as well.
Might as well say it as many times as we can. Are there other questions out there? Other thoughts? We have a handful of folks from the Campbell Culture Coalition who joined us today. So thanks to all of them for joining us, and thanks for letting us help work on this wonderful festival.
Stephanie asks, does he have any living relatives in this area? And if so, do they attend the festival?
Not in this area.
Well, I think he does. He does have is it his or is his ex-wife's family members? He had some people in Morristown that have come up a few times.
Yeah, because I remember the years that Ralph comes, he always spends time with family somewhere, and they come to the festival when he comes. I know it's those years specifically.
Joycelyn, do you know the answer to that? Who he has nearby? I see Joycelyn just. She's the president of the
Peggy does.
Peggy does.
I will say that my son. Well, the woman that comes, who I believe is related actually to Ralph's mother, I believe, her granddaughter has happened to be in school with my son for a while, and she's a marvelous pianist. I mean, by 8th grade, she was already just a wonderful pianist. So the music does seem to stay in the family there. They've got music still. And of course, you know, I think Ralph has several children too, but they're all up in Detroit area, I believe.
Ralph is a great bassist. I always enjoy when he comes to play. For me, that I guess that would be like the closest I would get to feeling what Howard Armstrong's presence could have been like, live. Because he definitely has his own style on stage. Ralph does.
And he likes to tell stories, just
He
like
loves,
his dad.
yeah, he loves to tell stories, and if Lauren, your son should really check out Ralph Armstrong's playing.
He's marvelous, and he does have his dad's gift of gab. I think I've heard him say that he could talk the chrome off the bumper of a Cadillac.
When we first started the festival, Howard's wife was still alive, and she would come to the festival, which was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice to meet Miss Barbara. And she told stories too. I think that's the thing, is when you're in the presence of someone who is such a great storyteller, and you get to hear their stories, then you absorb them and you embody them, and then you become the storyteller. And I remember being on campus at UT for a reception with Miss Barbara, and she started talking about Howard, and we all just gathered around the piano, stood around the piano, and listened to her talk about him being the love of her life, and how everybody should have a love in their lives like that. Barbara helped form a lot of the festival mission. Yes.
And Peggy chimed in that there are family members in Middle Tennessee and Western North Carolina that we've been in touch with.
Yeah, I think Howard's story is remarkable to me, especially being a person who wasn't born here, to find out about his story. It opens your eyes to the possibilities, and reminds you that you should not limit what you do just because you are in a certain place. I don't know. It's a weird feeling to think that you don't have any experience with anybody else doing what you imagine yourself doing. But then when you see someone who had that kind of experience or that knowledge and that skill, it automatically opens a door for you. So that's why I think it's important to tell his story, because there are people out there who need you to share his story, to open a door for them.
Well, I believe that's all of our questions. I want to offer a big thank you to our presenters, Sean McCullough, Kelly Jolly, and Chris Derman, for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge and passion about Howard and his legacy. For those who would like to know where to find more information about our presenters, as well as about Howard Armstrong and the Louie Bluey Festival, which will be back live and in person Saturday, September 24th, 2022, I encourage you all to visit and explore our research guide for this event. I'd like to thank also Pellissippi State's Event Services for their wonderful technical assistance. I would like to extend thanks to Allison McKittrick, our Strawberry Plains campus librarian, for organizing this event. And lastly, my thanks to all of you who have joined us today for the event.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Thank you, Allison. Thank you for the great questions and engagement, everybody.
Yes, indeed.
Y'all having a great day. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you all so much.
And I'll see y'all at Dollywood. I'll be at Dollywood Saturday.
All right. Everybody have a great afternoon.
Get out and enjoy this weather if you can.
Is it nice?
It is nice.
I'm in my little hole.
I did a little
Me too.
on earlier in the yard.
Oh, outside.
Yeah.
I need to get outside. I think I will do that today. I need to pick up my ukulele for a little while.
Sounds good.
You got a gig this weekend.
Yep. I'll be at Dollywood. So I need to put my hands on my instrument. It was good to see everybody online. See your names online.
We still got some people hanging out with us.
Yeah. Did we get everybody's question? To learn more? Yes, learn more about Howard.
I think we did.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you,
Bye.
Brandon.
Yeah, thank you all.